Hello, my name's Julie. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to share with you a couple of cards that I've made for a friend. Her mum is turning 70 soon and she asked me to make two cards, one for her to give to her mother and one for her children to give to her grandmother. The cards are going to have photos in them, but for privacy reasons I won't be putting the photos in until after I've finished videoing. Both of the cards are going to be 6 inches square, so I've cut one sheet of white cardstock in half, so it's 6 inches by 12 inches. Then I've folded it at 6 inches, so thereby giving me the two cards that I require. For the first card I'm going to use Papercraft Secret Garden paper pad. This is the card that the children will be giving to their grandmother. Because I have 4 photos to include in this card, I've decided to use the Pop and Twist card that Alicia McNamara has over on her YouTube channel called Papercraft Secrets. I'll put a link to that in the description box below if you want to check out her beautiful card. Hers is a Christmas card that's made with Minte papers and it looks beautiful. I've chosen 4 pattern papers to use as the basis for my card. I'm going to trim them down so that I've got a 1/16 of an inch showing all the way around on each part of the card. I'm going to put a pattern paper on the front, the 2 insides and the back. I ink the edges of all the papers and use double-sided tape to attach them to the card base. I'm going to make the twist and pop section now, so I'm going to cut a piece of white cardstock that is 3 inches by 12 inches. I'm going to use my scoreboard and I'm going to score it at 3, 6 and 9 inches. The first fold I'm going to make at the 6-inch mark, which will be a mountain fold, and then the fold at the 3-inch and the 9-inch marks will both be valley folds. So I'll end up with like a zigzag effect. I'm now going to use some pattern paper to cover those pieces on the right side, the side that will be showing when the card opens. Because the photos that I'm going to be adding here are of different sizes, I don't need to put any pattern paper on the first section of the card. I have inked all of the edges of the pattern paper and I'm using double-sided tape to attach it to the folded cardstock. So now we're going to make the mechanism that makes the fold pop out when you open the card. So we're going to cut a piece of cardstock that's 8 inches by 3 inches. We're going to use our scoreboard, and with the 8-inch edge along the top we're going to make a mark at 2 1/4 inches and 5 3/4 inches. Then we're going to flip the cardstock around and we're going to do the same thing on the other side, mark at 2 1/4 and 5 3/4. We then score at 4 inches. We then rotate our piece of cardstock so we've got our short edge against the top, and we score at 1 3/4 inches, which is the middle. Use your ruler and a pencil to lightly draw a line between the 2 horizontal marks. They should intersect through the centre fold, so we should have a nice point at the centre. Now we can use our scoreboard to score along those lines that we have just drawn, and the trick here is to make sure that you go through the centre of the card. So at this stage we've got a fold line through the centre horizontally, a fold line through the centre vertically, and a cross of fold line. I then erased the pencil lines that I had drawn in because I didn't want them to show once my mechanism was created. Okay, so now we're going to do the folding. So make a mountain fold along the horizontal centre fold. Burnish it well with your bone folder because we want it to fold easily. Now we're going to do a valley fold for each of the angled folds. Once again, be sure to burnish those well with your bone folder. Now we come to the tricky part. Pick your piece of cardstock up so that you have got the crease at the top, and then make your little edges come together in the centre. It's a bit hard to explain, so hopefully you can see it. I won't speed this section up. So we end up with a little shape that looks like a house. Burnish those folds really well. I'll show again here. So our fold is actually facing up. Push it together and then pull it towards you, or towards the centre. Measure up from the bottom of the house 1¼ inches and draw a line across on half. Then flip your house over and do exactly the same on the other leg, but it will be on the opposite side. So measure up 1¼ inches. Apply double-sided tape to both sections below the line that we've just made. Do not go over the line. Now take the folded up 4-section piece that we've already created and insert that between the two house legs. Line it up with the line that we've made for the tape and then lay it flat onto the mechanism. Position it centrally so you've got the same amount above as below the little house section, and then remove your double-sided tape and attach the 4-fold piece onto our mechanism. Flip it over and do the same for the other side, being careful to make sure that you get it nice and straight. Now we're going to attach tape to the roof of the house. So I'm going to attach the tape to both sides. Using a pencil, make a mark on the inside of your card, 3 inches in from each edge, which is the centre of course, and just put a little dot there with your pencil. This is where we're going to put the point of our little house assembly. With the left hand leg of the house at the top of the pile, position your mechanism at the point that we've just made. Remove your double-sided tape and attach the mechanism to the card base. Once you're happy with the position, press your mechanism firmly into place and then remove the double-sided tape from the top section of the house roof. We're going to close the card onto this section to finish the assembly. Once you've closed the front of your card down, give it a good burnish with your hands to make sure that it's a good stick. I opened and closed mine a number of times and gave it a good press just to make sure that everything was in place and everything worked well. I'm going to start to embellish the card now. I've got some net that's got like a polka dot on it. I've cut a piece of that that's big enough to cover the front of the card. Now I'm going to use a doily, and these are just doilies from the cheap shop. I'm going to cut this doily because I don't want the whole thing on there. I've selected a couple of papers from the pad and I've used my Tim Holtz tattered florals to cut 3 of the largest flower and 2 of the spiky flower, and I'm going to create a flower to go on the front of this card. Firstly, I'm going to cut down into the joins of each of the petals on the 3 large flowers, and then I'm going to ink around the edge of those. Once I've inked around the edge of them, I'm going to roll the edges using my pokey tool. The other 2 die cut flowers, I'm going to ink the edges of those, fold them in half and then roll them around my pokey tool. I have made this flower before for another one of my cards, and I'll put the link to that in the description box if you're interested in having a look at that card as well. Now that I've got all the parts of my flower ready, I'm going to start to put them together. I'm going to use my Aleene's Original Tacky Glue. Just put a dab of that in the middle of each flower and attach them one on top of the other. When I attach them, I try to step them so that they're sitting off centre to each other. The 3 large flowers go on first, and then the 3 smaller flowers on top of that. I use my foam mat and my pokey tool to poke in the middle so that it gives the flower a bit of extra dimension. By pushing down in the middle, it makes the petals pop up. I've got this sheet of large sticky crystals that I decided to use on the centre of the flower. I've cut some white cardstock as photo mats. I'm going to ink around the edge of those and attach them to the 3 pop-up sections that are going to hold the smaller photos. As I said, one of the photos, which is going to be on the left hand end there, is the full size of the piece, so there's no pattern paper behind it and there's no mat required for that. I'm just checking here to make sure that the extra layers of cardstock doesn't make it too bulky to open and close as it should. Using my apple blossom large numbers and suffixes, I cut 70th from some of the paper from the paper pad. I use the same Blue Lagoon ink pad to ink around the edges of the 70. For the greeting, I'm going to use these Papercraft clear stickers. I'm going to use 2 different ones actually. I'm going to use one from their birthday wishes pack and one from their happy birthday pack. The happy birthday is I'm going to attach to some of the blue cardstock. I'm going to cut it in half so that I can have 2 separate words, and the other saying will go on the inside of the card. I'm going to trim the saying down, the greeting down, so that it's got a small blue border all the way around. Once they're trimmed down, I'll use the same blue ink to ink around the edges. I attach these to my card front using foam squares. I use glue to attach the 70th to the card. I've used the Tim Holtz Tattered Florals die to cut some leaves from some of the paper from the cardstock. I ink around the edges and down the centres of these flowers using the blue ink pad. I also roll them around my pokey tool to give them a bit of dimension as well. I ink around the edge of the doily so that that is ready to be attached to the card front. Now that I've got all of my elements ready to attach to my card, I use my hot glue gun and attach them where I want them to be. For a little extra sparkle, I use some Aleene's tacky glue and attach a few sequins randomly on the front. The inside's looking a little bit plain, so I decided to use my Do Craft scalloped hearts, and I cut 3 hearts out of some of the pattern paper from the pad and just attached them inside of the card, sort of tucked behind the photo mats. Now I'm using the Papercraft clear stickers once again to put the greeting on the inside of the card. The greeting says, "May your birthday be as special as you are." I actually stick the sticker onto some of the blue pattern paper from the pattern pad, and I then mat that on some white cardstock before I mount it with glue on the inside of the card, just above the pop-up section. The leaves that I'd created looked too much the same as the background to me, so I got out my Manor House rose leaves in both small and large, and I used those to add behind the flower just to give that extra colour. And that completed that card. We're going to start the second card now. For this one I chose a different range of products. I've got some lace here that came out of my stash. I've got some chipboard. I was going to use these cream cards, but I decided to go with white. I've got this printed vellum and these 13 art on the wall papers. Because the background of the pattern papers is white, I decided to go with the white card that I had prepared earlier when I did the first card in this video. I take the wood grain looking pattern paper and tear the edges of it, tearing it down to about 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 to layer on top of my card. I then choose another pattern paper from the range, this pinky florally paper, and I do the same thing with that, but I make that slightly smaller than the wood grained piece. So this one's probably going to be about 5.5 inches once I've torn it down to size. I trim a piece of the lace to about the same size as the top layer of pattern paper. My mother gave me this lace. It's beautiful lace. I wanted to use a piece of this chipboard, so I actually cut it in half lengthways and use it that way. I also trim it down so that it's approximately the same width as the lace. I choose another piece of the pattern paper and I trim it down to about the same size as the chipboard because I want to mount the chipboard on something to make it stand out from the background. I've got this vellum which is has gold text printed on it. I got it out of a DCWV paper pad called Scripts and Music Notes, and I'm going to use a layer of that on top of my card. I'm going to trim it down to 5 inches by 5 inches so that it sits nicely over the top of the pattern paper. I have this packet of embellishments that I have with the pack of paper. I actually did a class with 13 Arts when they were here in Adelaide, and I had to leave early, so I never got to finish the cards that we were making. So this embellishment pack is what's left over from that. All of these leaves I have fussy cut from the pattern paper, so I'm going to use the leaves and the flowers from the pack and arrange them on my card. There was also this doily which I use as well. I'm now going to ink all of the papers on my card using a cinnamon ink pad. Using my hot glue gun, I begin to assemble my card, the layers of paper and also the embellishments that I've decided on at this point. I had a look through my resin shapes and found this heart. I've added some foam tape to the bottom section of it because I'm going to add that over the top of the chipboard, and if I just try to use glue it will wobble about. So I'm using the foam tape so that it's nice and solid. This little label was also in the bag of embellishments, so I decided to use that for my greeting. I'm going to use a stamp that I think I got with a magazine I purchased that says Happy Birthday. I'm going to stamp that using black StazOn ink. I use foam squares to attach that to the card front. I chose another of the pattern papers. I trimmed it down to 5 7/8 by 5 7/8, inked the edges and attached it to the inside right of my card. Once again, I wanted a bit of variation in the leaves, so I dug out these mesh leaves that I had in my stash. I don't know what brand they are, and I have attached 2 of those in amongst all of the fussy cut leaves that I had already added to the card. So that brings me to the end of my video for today. I've created 2 cards for a friend to give her mother for her 70th birthday. As I said earlier, I will be adding some photos to the inside of these cards to make them a bit more personal, and I do actually add the word nanny on the inside of the card that the children are giving to the recipient. Thank you for watching my video today. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel, and if you want to share my video with your friends, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.